This is another sign of the times, a commentary and an analysis. Rate of climate change is increasing rapidly. The global output of heat-trapping carbon dioxide jumped by the biggest amount on record, the U.S. Department of Energy has calculated, a sign of how feeble the world's efforts are at slowing man-made global warming, or whatever have you call it. The new figures for 2010 mean that levels of greenhouse gases are higher than the worst-case scenario outlined by climate experts just 4 years ago. The more we talk about the need to control emissions, the more they are growing, said John Riley, co-director of MIT's Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change. The world pumped approximately 564 million more tons, 512 million metric tons of carbon into the air in 2010 than it did in 2009. That's an increase of 6%. That amount of extra pollution eclipses the individual emissions of all but 3 countries, China, the United States, and India, the world's top producers of greenhouse gases. It is a monster increase that is unheard of, said Greg Marland, a professor of geology at Appalachian State University who has helped calculate Department of Energy figures in the past. Extra pollution in China and the United States account for more than half the increase in emissions last year, Marland said. It's a big jump, said Tom Bowden, director of the Energy Department's Carbon Dioxide Information Analysis Center at the Oak Ridge National Lab. From an emissions standpoint, the global financial crisis appears or seems to be over. Bowden said, but in 2010, people were traveling and manufacturing was back up worldwide, spurring the use of fossil fuels, the chief contributor of man-made climate change. India and China are huge users of coal. Burning coal is the biggest carbon source worldwide, and emissions from that jumped nearly 8% in 2010. The good news is that these economies are growing rapidly, so everyone ought to be for that, right? Riley said. Broader economic improvements in poor countries has been bringing living improvements to people. Doing it with increasing reliance on coal is imperiling the world. In 2007, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued its last large report on global warming, it used different scenarios for carbon dioxide pollution and said the rate of warming would be based on the rate of pollution. Bowden said the latest figures put global emissions higher than the worst-case projections from the climate panel. Those forecast global temperatures rising between 4 and 11 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century, with the best estimate at 7.5 degrees. In other words, it could be much worse than even the worst-case scenarios, with temperatures rising much sooner than predicted. Of course, no one knows for sure how much and how fast temperatures will rise, or what effect it will have on the climate of Earth. But it will produce more extreme, volatile weather, with some places being colder and some places being warmer. It could mean hotter summers and colder winters. Remember, the Earth is a living being or entity in some kind of sense or way, and it will respond to man-made pollution or contamination of the Earth. Nobody really knows for sure what the response will be. Even though global warming skeptics have attacked the climate change panel as being too alarmist, scientists have generally found their predictions too conservative, Riley said. He said his university worked on emissions scenarios, their likelihood, and what would happen. The IPCC's worst-case scenario was only about in the middle of what MIT calculated are likely scenarios. Chris Field of Stanford University, head of one of the IPCC's working groups, said the panel's emissions scenarios are intended to be more accurate in the long term and are less so in earlier years. He said the question now among scientists is whether the future is the panel's worst-case scenario or something more extreme. The head of the Engineering and Public Policy Department at Carnegie Mellon University said of the new figures, We are building up a horrible legacy for our children and grandchildren. Yes, this is what happens when everything is done in the name of money. But Riley and University of Victoria climate scientist Andrew Weaver found something good in recent emissions figures. The developed countries that ratified the 1997 Kyoto Protocol Greenhouse Gas Limiting Treaty have reduced their emissions overall since then and have achieved their goals of cutting emissions to approximately 8% below 1990 levels. The United States did not ratify the agreement. In 1990, developed countries produced about 60% of the world's greenhouse gases. Now, it's probably less than 50%. We really need to get the developing world, because if we don't, the problem is going to be running away from us, Weaver said. And the problem is pretty close from running away from us. In other words, the limits or tipping points are being reached quickly. This too is another sign of the end times, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary happenings, changes, and events. Everything that must change quickly or rapidly, and for the better, because it really is about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. And that is a very important question to ask. Everything is connected, and everything is numbered. It's also called fate or destiny. Revelation chapter 22. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. 2. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. 3. There shall be no more curse, but the throne of God and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. 4. They shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. 5. And there shall be no night there, and they need no candle, neither light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. 6. And he said unto me, These sayings are faithful and true, and the Lord God of the holy prophets sent his angel to show unto his servants the things which must shortly be done. 7. Behold, I come quickly. Blessed is he that keeps the sayings of the prophecy of this book. Again, it's time for these prophecies to be fulfilled. And all these things happening are more signs.